literacy, but literally he could have been looking at something. They could have told him it was 100% different, and he just said, okay, I'll sign it.
It's also a known thing that people will admit to things that they didn't do because or sound like they're admitting to it because they've been inadvertently given clues of what to say. It's not a direct leading. Okay, so now say you took her down the street, and then it's not that direct, but they, investigators,
well, but it
happens accidentally.
Well, but even in this case, the story they were leading him to had no evidence to back it up. So, what is even going on there?
That's the hard thing. So I think Benny, he's pretty well safe.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, this is disappointing.
Okay, next suspect theory suspect theory.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would call it.
Yeah, is Max Flieg,
which is German for volume.
Is it?
No.
I don't speak German.
Okay, Max.
Max was 17 years old at the time of the disappearance.
I've heard about Max. One of the things I've never heard about him is how exactly he came to be a suspect to begin with.
What he did, what else got him in trouble, I think, is what's got him as a suspect.
I would agree with that. Although he failed a polygraph test, then reportedly admitted to kidnapping and murdering the girls. So I'm not sure how he grabbed the interest of the police initially. I think he may have just been a local deviant, especially given what happened later in his life.
Just one of the usual suspects.
Yeah, but the police had to have known this, so I don't know why they did it, but it was at the time illegal to give a polygraph test to a minor, but he was a minor.
They may not have known it.
So I don't know why they did that, but they did, and so they had to let him go and, get rid of all of the quote-unquote evidence that they had collected during that time.
Well, they had no evidence other than the
polygraph. There's literally no evidence, circumstantial or otherwise, to link Max to this case.
Although Max might have done it.
He might have. He was later convicted and imprisoned for the murder of a 14-year-old girl who rebuffed his advances, and he just tossed her body into a pond.
He suffocated her with a pillow.
Yeah.
No.
Max is
didn't. He's not the one who suffocated someone with a pillow.
Okay.
He choked her.
There's a bunch of similar things.
Yes.
There was a bunch of really skeezy ne'er-do-wells in this particular area of Chicago at the time.
They really are, yeah.
Although I get them a little mixed up.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
Yeah, I think of the suspects so far, Max is the strongest.
Well, that's good because we're going down the list of least likely to most likely, so it's good that you think that he's more likely than the others.
Well, yeah,
but I think I might have a couple that may be even more likely.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Next is a guy named Charles Melquist. He looks a bit like Elvis, too. Or like this character from Lazy Town that I don't really want to talk about how I know what a character from Lazy Town looks like or even what Lazy Town is.
What is Lazy Town?
I don't want to talk about it.
It's a video game.
Okay.
It's not a video game. I don't want to talk about it.
Googling Lazy Town right now.
A year after the Grimes sisters were found, a 15-year-old girl named Bonnie Lee Scott was found naked, tossed on the side of a road, a few miles from where the Grimes sisters had been found. And on November 16th, 1958, Loretta Grimes got a second call from a man she identified as the same caller who knew that Barbara had the crossed toes. And the caller told Loretta, "I committed another perfect crime. This is another one those cops won't solve, and they're not going to hook it on Bedwell or Barry Cook." We'll talk more about that.
Yeah, Benny Bedwell, Barry Cook, we haven't heard about yet.
Most people link this call to Melquist because he admitted to murdering Scott. And the murders are pretty similar. I'm not clear on the timing of this because it's possible that Melquist was in custody when the second call was placed. The stories of the murder charge and the second call to Loretta are side by side on the November 1958 issue of the Chicago Trib.
Which is why I don't entirely trust the story.
I would agree with that. Melquist suffocated Scott with a pillow in his car when she rebuked his sexual advances and then stripped her body naked and dumped her on the side of the road. Just, like I said, a couple miles away from where the Grimes were dumped. Some investigators say it's possible, as Joe was mentioning, that the Grimes sisters were suffocated, and that's how they died, either by pillow or by hand, and then dumped, or frozen and dumped. I mean, I guess it would make sense if maybe, we're talking a sexual deviant, we're saying, maybe Patricia, which one was the one that had sex? Barbara Maybe Barbara was like, you know what? Okay, fine. Yes, we'll have sex. It's, not rape, or I don't know if she was dating him, or like, I don't know, something. And then he was like, all right, Patricia, it's your turn. And she was like, no. And then he just, flew into a rage and killed them both. I don't know. The problem I really have with this is that Melquest actually wanted to be given the electric chair for murdering Scott.
Bonnie Lee Scott.
He seemed really remorseful, and if he really did want to be given the death penalty, why would you not just say, oh, also I killed 2 other girls, to really just cement your sentence?
The problem with Melquist is that he did smother Scott, but he smothered her, he dumped her body, he then came back later on and cut her head off.
Yeah, he did.
He
came back to
severely mutilated the body.
Well, later.
Yeah, he went back 2 or 3 times to the scene of the body.
Which is weird, and yet for the Crime Sisters, other than what the local animal population did to their bodies, we don't really see any
as far as you know, though,
after the fact. Well,
I mean,
cutting the head off is pretty severe.
It is.
And I'm sure that the idea was cut the head off and we'll take it and we'll hide it and they'll never be able to figure out who it was. Stupid thought process of a nut job.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if he was going to do that once, you would think that he would have said, oh, well, I better take their heads. Oh, I better go back for their heads.
Well, there's some escalation there, right?
That's
and
kind of what I was thinking,
especially if you've done it before and left their heads on, or maybe you did it before and you thought the local rodents would, rightly kind of mess them up, and it didn't happen enough, so the next time you think, I know, I'll take the head.
But if we're going to say escalation, then it seems like going for 2 right out of the gate, going from 2 to 1, taking on 2 girls is, even if they're teenage girls,
is a
much bigger task than taking on 1 teenage girl.
You guys remember 3 weeks ago when we were talking about how maybe a serial killer killed the 3 women in the Indiana Dunes, and I was like, why would you do 3 as your first try? And
yes.
You guys were like, because why not? Because there are 3 of them. They're just right there.
Joe said. I didn't say that.
But I mean, I think there's that same idea.
Yeah.
It could just be that, well, they were 2 girls together, or
and maybe the problem is that we know too much of the quote-unquote standard pattern that we're falling prey to that. But it just seems weird that he would pick up these 2 girls and go for it, and then suddenly, months later, just go after 1 and severely mutilate the body. It just seems very different to me.
Well, I think crime of opportunity sometimes.
There's that. I mean, like with the Indiana Dunes thing, it's like, this is a beautiful opportunity. Even if there are 3 of them, well, so what? They're at my mercy because I got them on a boat on a lake. There's no witnesses. It's a little different than trying to, abduct somebody off the streets, into your car.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think Scott was dating Melquest at the time when he murdered her. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't an abduction.
Do you remember how old Melquest was at the time?
He was like 23 or 25.
God, it was a completely different world. I forget that there's, a 15-year-old girl dating a 23-year-old guy is totally normal.
Well, I don't know if it was normal. It just wasn't, as...
It wasn't as frowned upon.
But it still happens today. I mean, it's not as though...
And I still think it's weird.
Yeah, I agree. But so who's to say that, maybe Barbara was seeing him, or maybe, maybe one of them knew him.
An acquaintance of some kind.
Yeah, it's not insane to think. And also, if they're walking home in the middle of winter and it's cold and it's late, and somebody they know drives up and says, do you guys want a ride? And they say, sure, it's just a couple blocks, we'll take a ride from that cute hunky college boy, and then oops, it turns out he's a psychopath and murders them.
Happens.
I mean, it's not exactly an abduction. I mean, it is an abduction, but it's not like this huge
forcible off the streets, kind of grabbing and
throw you into the murder van.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and that brings me to something that we talked about before. When you were talking about the timeline, there was a sighting of the girls having gotten off of the bus early. Mm-hmm. And what you were just saying of like picking up or thumbing a ride in some way or shape or form. Mm-hmm. I had been wondering, why would they get off of the bus except that you said, I think the timing was about 20 minutes before they should have arrived at home, if I remember that correctly. Does that ballpark sound right?
30 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much time. I think you guys have spent a fair amount of time on buses and public transportation. Mm-hmm. And what made me think about why would they get off of the bus is if they had to go to the bathroom. You know, I've done that. I've gotten on the bus, and 15 minutes later, I'm like, I have half an hour till I have to get there. I'm getting off at this next stop. I will find some place that's open. I will use their restroom, and I will get back on the next bus that comes by.
Or walk.
Well, you know, if it's far enough that it's a half-hour ride, I'm willing to wait the 20 minutes to have relieved my bladder.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things I thought of when we were talking about that earlier.
Or there was somebody creepy, or maybe they were riding the bus with somebody they knew.
Or maybe there was some place along the way to stop and get ice cream or God knows what.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. All kinds of reasons to get off.
Yeah, true.
Or maybe the bus just reeked of urine.
Or maybe they didn't have to be home. I remember, being a teenager and knowing, like, okay, this is when I have to be home, and I'm enjoying myself not being home around the 4 or 5 other kids and my single mom, who I'm sure is lovely and giving, but also, like, you're a teenager, so, like, blah. Maybe it was as simple as, it's a nice night out, it's kind of snowy, it's kind of fun, we don't need to be home for another half hour, let's just get off and walk.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
All right, last suspect.
Final suspect?
Final suspect.
Final answer?
Final answer. Barry Cook. You remember?
The Barry Cook?
Yeah, the Barry Cook. I don't know.
Baby.
Some,
Love you, baby. Oh, that's a different Barry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's Barry White.
Okay. Never mind.
Doesn't look anything like Barry Cook.
He doesn't, sure. Yeah. Barry Cook actually served time in prison, not for the Grimes murders.
He did sort of kill somebody.
Not for the Silas Jane connected murder of 3 boys, the Peterson-Sussler murder, nor the murder of Margaret Gallagher, nor the murder of Judith Mae Anderson, though he is likely connected to all of those things. He spent 9 years in the Joliet jail, and he was released on September 20th, 1967. He has since married and has kids, so you will see a lot of blogs and articles online who refuse to name him. Apparently,
because of the kids.
Yeah, they think that, like, the kids should be. That's true. Cook was actually never, ever convicted of any crimes. But
so he must have pleaded guilty then? And avoided a trial? Because how did he wind up in prison if he was not convicted of anything?
He was sentenced. He pled guilty to this. He wasn't ever convicted of any of the murders. He wasn't, anything like that. He pled guilty to rape and assault to rape, and he was sentenced to 1 to 14 years in Statesville prison. And he was released early for good behavior.
Statesville doesn't sound like a real place.
Statesville?
Statesville sounds like a place
TV
you would
name.
See on The Sims or something.
Yeah. It's like Cookieville minimum security orphanage.
Yeah.
But apparently Barry Cook passed a lie detector test for the Grimes murders and the Peterson-Schlussler murders, so the police decided he was not guilty of the crime.
Frickin' lie detectors.
So there you go.
Yeah.
That's
Well, Cook,
that's it.
Yeah.
I think he.
Wait. So you just like dropped him and walked away like he was a bad microphone. Like, wait, why is he the last on your least to most likely suspect list?
Well, because he was awful. I mean, I think he definitely was involved in all of those murders in some way. I think he was a serial killer, and he just managed to not get caught. He got caught for, like, rape charges. But he was a violent sexual deviant who has a long history of being very closely connected to a number of cases that are all very similar to each other. Most of them, except for the one with the Silas Jane one, they're all young women, like 13 to 15 years old. They were all suffocated and dumped naked on the side of the road.
Somehow he managed to go straight, or either that or he was just really good. He got back out of prison, has had a family, continued to kill.
I guess. I don't know. I have no idea.
See, that's why I'm asking, because
I don't know.
The fact that this guy is, I'm going to use your term, linked to all of these other murders, but never caught, and yet he was investigated. It smacks a little strange, as if he is the usual suspect. It's almost like Gloss, is that the investigator? It's almost as if somebody similar to him had said, that Barry Cook, he's a bad apple. We got to get that guy. We have got to get him for something. And hey, we've got a dead girl. Bring Barry Cook in.
Yeah.
We're going to put him in the lineup. Oh, nope, she didn't pick him out. Oh, another dead girl. Bring Barry Cook in. He's like the most wanted of the local police.
Well, the trick is that with all of these murder, the Grimes sisters, there's no evidence. There was no evidence on their bodies, right? There's nothing to link anybody to
which
the
is why
case, right?
You can't really say Barry Cook was not actually seriously linked to much of anything, because there wasn't any evidence in any of these crimes that really tied him to those things.
Which almost, in my mind, almost speaks more than if there was evidence. I mean, obviously, if there was evidence, that speaks a lot, but I also think it's equally suspicious that there happened to be no evidence on any of these bodies. But I do agree that it does seem odd that he managed to spend some time in jail, like 9 years in jail, and then, get out and get married and have kids and lead a otherwise normal life.
Yeah.
As far as we know.
Well, as far as we know.
But if he was out still hunting around and slumming a little bit, going out, I've had a couple of drinks, let's go kill a girl, there should have been more bodies dropping.
Well, this is not something you should say, but maybe he picked up some good tips in his stay at Joliet.
Well, good point.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never understood what it was that he did to initially become a suspect
I agree.
In this.
I totally agree.
To then, because it's never listed.
Yeah.
It's never said. It's just
again,
news
it's because people are trying to protect him and his family.
No. What I mean is that I've never seen which case he first showed up in to then be able to try and link him backwards in time. In other words, to build the timeline of, he was hauled in for stealing the governor's car or something like that, and that's when they said, you're on the bad track, boy, you got to clean up. Like, I want to build the timeline of him out, and I've never. I tried a little bit.
It's impossible.
It's a tricky thing, because if you're gonna do a crime like this, which can be opportunity or can be something very planned or whatever. No matter what, a lot of them are going to look about the same. You're going to abduct a girl, maybe rape her, maybe not, but in the interim, wind up strangling her, dumping her by the side of the road somewhere. So that's the same MO. They look a lot alike. You know? And you could say, wow, these must have been committed by the same guy. Well, not necessarily at all. I mean, it's entirely randomly different people.
Very similar acts that can appear.
But I will also say that we are talking about Chicago, and it doesn't have no crime, so it wouldn't. Just because we haven't heard of them doesn't mean.
But we can also say at that time in Chicago, there were a lot of people moving through that area who could have been almost like, who was the truck driver that was leaving prostitutes across the interstate system of this country?
You mean the happy face killer?
No, not that one. No, this was 15 or 20 years ago, and I can't remember who it is. It doesn't matter.
The happy face killer was actually a truck driver who killed people all around the interstate highway system. There was a happy face killer.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking you're just thinking of the smiley face killer.
No, there's also a happy face killer.
But my point is that there were people flowing through Chicago.
Oh yeah, it could have been from out of town.
Like a river, no pun intended.
Oh yeah.
So
it's a major shipping hub, of course. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just finish by saying it definitely wasn't Dr. Hodel.
No, I don't think it was Dr. Hodel either. I do suspect it was probably somebody they knew.
I would agree with that.
I suspect that. Other than that, I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
So many good suspects. That's
I think they probably did die in any timeline of 24 hours after their disappearance, and then they were held somewhere.
Kept in an ice box somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah. Other than that, yeah, that's. Oh gosh, hang on. Let me think. Who can we hang this on? Okay, forget it. I have nothing. You want to wind it up?
I do.
Okay.
Ready?
Sure.
Okay. You can find some links to our research. We'll probably throw at least one old-timey news article in there.
There's a lot of them out there.
Yep. That will be found on our website. The website is thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can listen to us there. You can also listen to us on iTunes, or you can stream us or whatever. If you can, subscribe if you haven't already. And if you can, rate and review.
A
That's
good review
great.
is best.
Always best.
Yeah.